Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Contact Lost, the Polish competitive Warhammer 40k podcast about, competitive Warhammer 40k, both in Poland and abroad. Um, Not sure if you've seen the previous episode where I made an announcement, but if you haven't heard the news yet, Contact Lost has been invited to join the team of London Grand Tournament, and the Joker, myself, and our newest addition to the team, the tech savvy Vitalis, will be going to the event to provide coverage. And as far as I know, there's not going to be a stream. It's more about doing interviews with people post game and doing like an end of day studio, like a sports studio or something like that, which is very exciting. But to all of you listeners, it will be just an opportunity to come and say hi and see us live as well, and etc. So I strongly recommend that you come, that you give us a visit, that you come and say hi or something like that. So we will be there, and because of that, we are starting early. We are starting with a new series that I called The Road to LGT, and this is meant to bring to your attention the celebrities of 40k from around the world and the uh, and the officials of 40k that manage those events and so on. So we will be interviewing plenty of people who most likely will appear at the event, and we will try to hype it up for you a little bit. So this is the second episode of the series. The first one was with Manny. Manny Chima, if you haven't seen that, go give it a look. Today, I'm talking to another special gentleman, an exceptional player, the captain of Team Scotland, Innes Wilson.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for joining, and thanks for agreeing, and thanks for being here. I mean, this is a new series to us as well. We'll see how it goes, but I think the questions that I have prepared are pretty good, and from what I hear, you are very eager and very open about certain things. So, I heard a lot about you and I know exactly who you are, but there are listeners from around the world who might not have heard the name or might not be exactly familiar with who Innes Wilson is. So can we have just a little bit of introduction, who you are, what is your story, what do you like to play, and some of your successes, perhaps?
Yeah, no worries. First of all, frankly, it shocks me and surprises me every time anybody tells me they know who I am, because it just doesn't sound right to me. It's not something that I ever thought was going to happen when I started playing 4K when I was 11 years old. So anyway, yeah, I'm Innes Wilson. I am the captain of Team Scotland. I've been playing 4K since I was 11, so coming up for 15 years now, which is a frighteningly high percentage of my time and also not that long for a lot of people. I have been in and out of the tournament scene since about 2014. I started playing when I was at university. I just needed something to fill the time, and over the course of about a year, I realized that I wanted to try and take it a little more seriously. I started going to some local tournaments, and then from there, I ended up meeting a couple of people who were involved in the Team Scotland team, and it all just snowballed catastrophically from there for my free time and my budget and my sanity, frankly. I've been doing fairly well at tournaments for probably the last 4 years or so, not including the COVID times. Like when I started, I was kind of dire. You kind of the whole snowflake thing you go through where I'm like, I can definitely make Grey Knights work in 7th edition. Spoiler alert, I could not. It was very difficult. They were not very good. Had some mixed success through 7th edition. 8th edition, I kind of took off a little bit. I got onto the WTC team proper. Played my first WTC in 2018, which is the year that Scotland came third, which was a really, really good high point to start on, and also has been desperately, desperately sad chasing it for the last 4 years now, because we've not done as well as that since then. I believe we have come 26th and 17th in the 2 years that we've played since then. So, I've got a third place trophy sitting on my shelf, and I'm like, I want that again, and we're not getting there yet. So that stings, not gonna lie, but we're working on that. And since I've taken over captaincy, that's been my big drive, is getting us to a position where in a few years' time we can start pushing for that again. Outside of that, I have won a couple super majors. I won Newcastle and Manchester this year, both with Tyranids. I've won GTs and majors, various outside that. Obviously, I have a third place at the ETC. I've top four at LGT before. That was the 2018 one, 2019 one, where I played White Scars, whatever that one was. I play broadly Tyranids, Chaos, whatever, and Space Marines are kind of like the armies I focus on. But I've dashed in and out. I've played some AdMech. I've played Imperial Knights, whatever takes my fancy. And I'm definitely going to buy Votan because everybody's going to buy Votan because I want to win Alpha.
Okay. Wow, that's great ambition, and fingers crossed that it happens. But again, I keep repeating that to all my guests. Fingers crossed for your successes, but
Yeah, you can't have fingers crossed for everybody, mate. You got to pick one of us.
Exactly. I need to have a favorite. So yeah, let's silently agree. No one knows. Let's silently agree that it's you this time. So pretty excited about Votan, but I wanted to ask about pretty much your playstyle, because we're doing those interviews because potentially our listeners might actually come to the event and face you at some point. So before we go to like potential armies that you might want to play, tell us about your playstyle. On what basis do you pick your armies? I mean, is it like, because Manny has this style where he just skews into something heavily, like very heavily. Do you tend to build old rounders or also skew lists, or do you look for something unpredictable that no one else expects?
So I feel like this question is target designed to drive like a needle into my brain and really annoy me because I have a very, I don't want to seem notorious, but like in the circles that I run in, so through my podcast and like our Discord and stuff like that, I am very big on saying that playstyle does not exist. It's not a thing. There is no such thing as playstyle. It is just simply you are taking what you are comfortable with and making mistakes to feel comfortable instead of playing what is optimal. So what I try to do is always play optimally. Obviously, that's not always possible. You're going to make mistakes. You are going to fall back into comfort zone. But I try to play whatever I think is best within like whatever my range of armies is. So last time at the WC or at LGT, I wasn't playing AdMech and I wasn't playing Drakari. So I played what I thought was the next best thing, which was Iron Hands. And I took a very heavy skew shooting list. A little bit of combat in there to keep people honest, and I played that. The couple of years before that, I thought that the best thing you could play was the Space Marines Codex. So I played a Space Marines army that was super aggressive. I try not to pigeonhole myself into being, I play a skew list, I play a defensive list, I play a super aggro playstyle. I try to play what I think is right, and I don't think that's a playstyle so much as it's just it's a mentality. I think you can kind of argue that there are playstyles that exist. You could be a horde player or whatever. But if you're playing a horde because it's a horde, not because it's what you think is best right now, you are taking something that you think you have a skill in and saying that I think my skill in this is better than the disadvantage I get from taking it. And I don't think that's a playstyle. I think that's a mistake.
Okay. So if we look at the army composition of, let's say, your Tyranids, for example, what would be your choices and how would you justify them? You say, you play what you think is right. So what is currently right for Tyranids, for example?
So currently for Tyranids is actually awkward because I've not touched Tyranids really since WTC. So for WTC, I played the double Harpy and 2 Warrior Bricks and a single Hive Tyrant, which I thought was an incredible list when you have the goal of being the player on your team that goes and gets 15 every round. You just pair it to never have to play, never have to lose the Harpies on turn 1, or if you do lose the Harpies, it doesn't matter because you're playing something you destroy with 2 squads of Warriors. So I played that list. It went incredibly successfully. I lost a Tyranid mirror match and smashed all 6 of my other games at WTC. It was fantastic. Did everything I wanted to do. In singles play, I don't know if that's necessarily the right approach. I don't love Harpies when you can rock up and your opponent deploys 4 Hammerheads. So I would probably go a little lower to the ground, maybe something like the double Hive Tyrant list that Anthony Vanel's been playing, with like 3 squads of 9 Warriors and 2 Hive Tyrants, something along those lines. A little more lower to the ground, could hide on LGT boards. That's something I would have considered playing if I hadn't found the list I did find for LGT. Was a lower to the ground Tyranids list. I was experimenting with Old One Eye for a little bit because I really like the character on target ability of playing like 2 Hive Tyrants, Old One Eye, and then a bunch of stuff that just hides behind walls, and you just win the game with sheer force of inevitability. Over the 10 round LGT, you don't need to win your games by a lot. You just need to win by a couple of points. Tyranids are quite good at that because it's really hard to push into them, and they're really good at taking your primary off you. Their secondaries are terrible, frankly. Tyranid secondaries are not good. So I was definitely looking at doing something like that. Double Tyrant was considering even running the Swarm Lord just to double down on that primary denial. But obviously that was a little bit more lost in the sauce than I was willing to go for, and I'm letting a teammate my Tyranids instead.
Okay, so most recently you've been to the Unconquerable event. And what did you take, and how did you do?
So
Because this wasn't Tyranids.
to that, I took Eric Lathos' Gene Stealer Cut list from WTC, which is frankly one of the strangest lists I've ever played. It is so weird. It is so for rough context, it is a custom cult of Gene Stealer cults, which runs no Psychers and one combat unit. There is one squad of Gene Stealers with the pregame move, and then it's 3 squads of 10 bikes and 2 20-man neophyte squads with seismic cannons. And the entire idea of the list is that you make your opponent as miserable as humanly possible and then table them. And I still don't understand why it does as much damage as it does, but this list just, like, I played a little local event this weekend, and I played 3 of my teammates in 3 rounds. The first round I played against our team's Unari player, and he looked at my arm and went, I play G-Soccer, I know what this does, and I tabled him. Or near enough, I deleted half the stuff on turn 2, like everything he had that was relevant. He had the Yin card dashing about the board that I never put a wound on. And then game 2, my Tau teammate had seen this happen, knew what was going to happen, and then lost 9 of his 10 crisis suits on turn 2. And he was like, I don't know what happened. And then my Tyranid player that had seen that happen to the previous 2 players lost all 18 warriors on turn 2. And he's like, I don't know what happened. And I'm like, well, the same thing that happened to the other 2 guys.
So this only shows how ingenious and unpredictable the Australian lists were, because apparently that wasn't the only one that caught people by surprise. But this one, yeah, to this day, I'm not entirely sure what this is supposed to do, and as you said, why it does so much damage. So you have a very positive record with that list.
Yeah, so across Unconquerable, I went 4-1. I ended up losing to Jamie Balcomb's Custodes list. I went way too aggressively when I didn't need to, and then did that thing. The Custodes did that thing they do where they roll 4 pluses, and I gave myself a loss condition I didn't need to have. I believe with my entire full send on turn 1 with 3 squads of bikes, 3 rock grinders, and a squad of Gene Stealers, I killed 1 bike and 1 Sagittarium, which then meant that his entire army charged me on turn 1. And you don't recover from that against Custodes. I held on by the skin of my teeth until like turn 5 when I got tabled. And other than that, I'm 7-0 excluded. So with that game, 7-1. I've played Tyranids, I've played Sisters, I've played Unari, I've played Necrons, all the meta boogie stuff. I've not played the 170 racks list that Manny's playing. I really want to see how that matchup goes. I'm hoping that's the LGT finals. But yeah, no, the list is so good. I don't understand it at all, but it just scores points.
Okay, so by what you've just said, I understand that you're maybe revealing a little bit what you're going to take to the event. So any list refinements or anything?
No. So
how are you taking that list to the event?
I am playing the same list I took to Unconquerable and to YRT last weekend. I've submitted it for the Invitational already. I have another couple of days. I might make like a small tweak or 2. I've been speaking to Eric about it a little bit. He's changed the list in a direction that I'm not a huge fan of personally. He's done some very Eric changes, and I kind of look at it and I'm like, I like hand flamers. You don't have any of those left, and that's why I got into Gene Stealer cults. My WTC 20 or ETC 2019 list had a squad of 20 bladed clog with old grudges, so for the 4 heroes to wound, with hand flamers and 8 rock saws. And it was like the only Gene Stealer cult in my list was like 4 characters, and that squad of 20 and 2 squads of 5 acolytes. It was just hand flamers, and it won me so many games. So I played GSC for hand flamers is the real secret of that. Okay. So yeah, Eric's changes are, I don't want to say a little too lost in the sauce for me because the entire list is lost in the sauce, but I got on board with it at that point, and then he's gone even further, and I'm like, I can see the shore from here. Like, I can at least tell what's going on now. I've played 8 games with this. I'm not following you any further, which is probably wrong, and I'll probably end up regretting it after the event. But no, for now, I'm just straight playing Eric's WTC list. No changes.
Okay. All right. And then, so that's good to hear because the list is amazing, and I guess people will be rooting for it just because it's a difficult to understand underdog in the current meta, because with whoever I talk to, from Poland or from abroad, when I discuss the meta with people basically tend to give me, I don't know, 5 armies that sit comfortably at the top. GSC is definitely not
definitely not one of them. No, frankly, I don't think GSC are a top 10 army. This list is, but I don't think the army is. The army is flat terrible. This list is a perfect confluence of the meta right now, where it turns out that AP dash ignores cover is way better than AP1, and GSE have AP dash ignores cover in absolute spades.
So this brings me to my next question. How do you feel going into the LGT? So I understand there probably will be some events along the way, but going into the LGT, from your standpoint, playing the army that you're playing, is the meta in a good place right now?
Having played a little more, I think the meta is in a good place. I'm very eager to be on the whole everything sucks bandwagon. It kind of my personal brand is the everything is terrible. This is how it could be better. Having played against Necrons a whole lot more now, you can kind of I'm starting to see the cracks in the armor. Like you can see the matrix on how to make any Necron player lose as long as you play it right. And like yeah, there's still game to play there. They're an incredible army, but I've started to see the cracks in the armor. And I'm like, okay, I played a Necron guy at WKTC. I went first and he scored 25 points. How do I make that happen more? And how do I start finding ways to make that happen when they go first? And I've started finding that, and it's helped me a lot personally in the meta. I don't know if that's just a reflection on kind of the, I'm going to say top end, including myself in that, which I think I'm allowed to at this point. I don't know how it is kind of in the mids. I know a lot of my teammates are a lot of like the people in the bubble around Team Scotland are, not loving the Necron Sisters secondary scoring. But we found a way to break Sisters and just be like, no, this is how you score 4 points against them. Like, you make them score 4 points. We're finding that for Necrons now. It just requires different lists. I think Tyranids are still mental. I despise what that army exists as, despite abusing it to the ends of the earth for my own personal gain. Because what would I be if I didn't? They're my favorite army and always will be. But the army it's not very fair. So I think Necrons took down, Tyranids took down, and we'd be in a much better place, which hopefully Balanced Data Slate comes out just after LGT. It should be here by the end of September. I think we'll be playing without it for LGT, given submission is this Sunday. Right, this Sunday? Right. Yeah, so I don't think we'll have it in time. But yeah, I think the meta is closer to a good place than I would have said it was a month ago.
Okay, all right. The list that you're piloting, does it have any significant bad matchups, or is it bad against anything from the top 5 or any other things? I don't know, Tau or anything like that?
I really don't know, and I know that's such a cop-out answer. I have literally played 8 games with this list. Every single one's been in a tournament. The only game I've lost so far is because I made a mistake, which says to me that it's a pretty good list, but also I'm a pretty good player, so I get to get away with a lot of stuff that other people wouldn't. Because I kind of understand the mechanics. I've played lists similar to this before, even though I've not played this specific list. I have experience with GSC. As of before Eric won a major this weekend, one of the 2 people to ever win a GT with the current GSC codex. It was me and Nick on the same weekend in March or February. So if that doesn't say a lot about this book's long standing, I don't know what does. So yeah, Tau doesn't feel fantastic. They have a lot of shots, but I also almost tabled them on turn 2. So I don't know. Custodes, it's a lot of 4-ups. There's a lot of Marines lists that you just don't really deal damage to, but your scoring is so good. It feels like there's always a path to victory in almost any matchup. There's not been anything that I've looked at and I've been like, yeah, I don't think I can kill that, or I don't think I can outscore that. And the fact that you get that wonderful confluence of having some fantastic secondaries with Retrieve Nephilim data being basically free, Brood Swarm being an incredibly easy secondary where you're just holding sections of the board with more models than your opponent in a list that's running 100 models. It's not all that difficult. Don't take that against Rax. Just remember that one. That you will not enjoy that. And then your third secondary can kind of be dealer's choice. Do you want a kill secondary? Do you want the very powerful ambush secondary? There's a lot of really cool options, and then also it has really good killing power. So there's not really any list that doesn't fall into the confluence of can fall over to scoring or can fall over to killing power for Genestealer Cult. So because Genestealer Cult have a really good set of either ones, they're not as good at scoring as Necrons, but they're a lot better at killing than Necrons. So it's kind of that similar where there's a lot more gameplay in there. You have to do a little bit more for your scoring, but there's a lot more you can do. So I don't know, it feels really good. I've really enjoyed playing them, and I've not gone into any game being like, okay, well, my hands are tied. This is a won or a lost game. Actually, no, I've gone into a lot of games being like, this is a won game. I've not gone into any games being like, this is a lost game.
Yeah, it sounds like the army, or the list is very mentally engaging. But then again, it pays off with a lot of options, a lot of ways to tackle your opponents and so on. But it boils down to, I guess, the pilot's skills.
And
So
yeah, ask me again after potentially 14 games over LGT Invitational and LGT how I still feel about playing that, and we'll see if I'm like leaking brain matter out of the side of my ear. But
exactly.
for now, it seems like a great idea to play it for 14 games over 4 days.
So that's I'm actually extremely happy that you mentioned this, because that's a fantastic segue to one of the questions that I wanted to ask. You being a seasoned competitive tournament player, you go to events, you usually hang around the top, which means that you usually get to play more games than your average Joe. How do you prepare for an event like this one, where you will play the Invitational, you will play the main event, which could sum up to 14 games? How do you build up the stamina for something like that?
So there's a kind of a blasé answer to that, and there's a real answer to that. The kind of blasé answer to that is that I'm a really quick player, and I try to table my opponents as quickly as I can in one games. I am. I don't want to say notorious, but a lot of the time at a tournament, you'll see me after like an hour being like, yeah, no, we played 5 turns, we're done, I tabled them, I got my 18-2, my 20-0. It's very frequent, to the point where I think it might be a problem that I play as quickly as I do sometimes, because you leave it a little bit. If you're playing that quickly, you're leaving percentage points on the table every time. But no, genuinely, my games just do go that fast. I played a little tournament up north, which for Scotland is saying something, where there was a prize. It was in a bar, and the bar sold a beer called Lost. So if you were the first person to lose a game in the round, you got a 4-pack of Lost. My opponent got that 3 out of 4 games, or 3 out of 5 games. I got it 1 out of 5 games, and then the other game that they got it finished 30 seconds before my game did. So just, yeah, no, I'm a very fast player, so it's actually an advantage. It is a skill, being able to have that that 2-hour break between games instead of an hour and lunch, or you get 45 minutes between game 3 and between game 2 and game 3. It really adds up. My finals at Newcastle, Manny and Vic went down to the wire on time. They played a full 3-hour round, and they started half an hour after us because their game just went out. So my game was done in an hour and a half. So I had a 2-hour break while Manny went from game to game. And that does a lot for your mental capacity going into it. I had time to sit. I sat and read the list, built a secondary plan, went into it with a game plan. I went for a walk. I cleared my head. I got a glass of water. Manny went game, bathroom, game. Yeah, it does a lot to help you. For as far as actually preparing, try and play a lot of games in a day. Like get a practice day with a couple of friends and try and play. Like if you've got 6 of you, try and play 4 of them in a day, and just play. Me and my teammate practice on 45-minute clocks. Me and my teammate Matty practice on 45-minute chess clocks, where we take 45 minutes each. We play as long as we can, and then if it's still interesting on turn 4 at that point, we'll just play without a clock and finish the last turn 5 or whatever. Or we get through 3 games in 2 hours. It's very, very good practice in some senses. It's not good for developing micro skills. How do you manage combats? But it's good for make the right decision quickly, which are very different skills. Try and lose some weight. That's what I'm working on, because it's less toll on your body. Buy a yoga mat is actually good advice. My teammate Brian pioneered that one at WTC. There was concrete floors. He brought a yoga mat. By the end of day 2, 4 of my teammates had them. It takes weight off you. Sit down if you can. All the little things, like take care of your body. I'm probably going to be doing LGT dry, at least until I lose a game. I'm not drinking this year, which is shocking for me, and I hate who I'm becoming as a person. But I don't know. I'll maybe have a couple. I'll have a couple of the Invitational. I'll drink at dinner, but during the day, I'm probably not going to be. Because if I want to win 10 games and my opponent's not drinking, I'm not going to be advantaged off of that. Yeah, it's a lot of little things.
You do make it sound like a sport, and more and more in esports, the people who do it, people start calling them athletes and so on. Soon we will have athletes in 40K as well.
It's real disturbing. I'm not going to lie to you. Based on my physique, you could probably tell I'm not somebody who did this in high school or university. This is all very, very new to me, and learning these patterns is something that I'm trying to do from friends who, being in Scotland, I have a lot of friends who did rugby and all that sort of thing in school. So trying to learn those patterns from them and copy them while also like managing them, quote unquote, as team captain is something I'm working on. That's something I'm very new to. And yeah, it's not something I like. If you go and watch the finals when I played Nick, or the last round of LGT 20, whatever the Space Marines one was, I think it was 2019, but I'm going to keep saying 2019 and hope I'm right. Where I played Nick in the finals, and there's a post match interview where we are both completely at our skulls. And this is like, we were like table 4 playing for potentially the win, and we're drunk out of our minds. And I don't think I could do that anymore with good conscience. Which is weird, what being 3 years removed from an event that you did when you were 22 will do to your head.
Yeah, it is what it is, and the older you get, the more you start feeling it. So it's actually, I think it's a positive trend that needs to be set. You know, people start treating this more and more as sport, and especially if you play 14 games, even if they are just 1.5 hour over 4 days, I think it will hurt you.
It's so much fun. It's so much 40k. Games are going to blur together. You're going to forget. You're going to miss big secondaries by the end of it. You just have to get used to it. Thankfully, I've just come off the back of WTC, where I did the 6-round singles, then the 7-round event. So I've done it was 13 games over 5 days of play with a gap day in between. So it's more condensed for LGT, but that's because I'm doing the Invitational. If you're not doing the Invitational, you're just doing the main event. It is 10 games over 3 days, which is a lot, which is more, but not significantly more. It's over like a stretch of days. I don't know. It's a lot, but we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So you sort of also touched upon this, but I feel our listeners might be interested in that because, again, you are a competitive player. You are a person who devotes a lot of time to this hobby. How much time, I don't know, a week, let's say, do you put into actual practice so that we get a perspective? Because I will be asking this question to all my guests to sort of have like a measurement of some sort, so that
that's fair.
people, they're at home sitting on their couch watching or listening to this know how much more they need to do. So what is it for you? What's the number?
So it's definitely been less the last month or so because we just came off of WTC. I'm definitely on this is my relaxed period until the end of October, where we repick the team, and then I get back into like captaining mode. So for the time being, I'm trying to do an event every 2 weeks and a practice game or 2 on the weeks I'm not doing an event at the moment, which is like still quite a lot of 40k. I'm playing 5 games a fortnight. Before WTC, I was trying to play 3 or 4 games a week, plus events. So I would try to do like two games on a night, and then another game and then like 2 more games on a weekend day, and then go to an RTT or play, a game, and then go to a GT or whatever, or play a practice game on the Friday night. So it was. I think I played roughly between sort of like the January stretch to the like the start of WTC. I played about 200 games in 8 months, I want to say. So yeah, it's about. Yeah, I try to go for like about 20 games a month. Is kind of where I aim for, but it's not a hard and fast number. It depends on life and all these other things, right? I don't really play TTS, which is another constraint on my practice time, but I do a lot more around it. I do I do my podcast stat check, so I'm always like always talking about 40k, always discussing it. So there's a lot of stuff outside of it on top of that. As the team captain, I'm kind of expected to be conversant in all the armies my team is playing as well, because I need to be able to have them come to me and trust me to know that I understand their army as well as they do, which means it's a lot of looking at lists and trying to understand things like that, pairings prep. So you get a little bit less out of it from the captaining side, but I play more than most of my team does as well, which is an advantage of being young and single. I don't have any of the like family commitments that other people have on top of that. So it's just work where I skive off and do 40k stuff in my break time as much as possible, and 40k, and then when I'm at home doing 40k usually. So yeah, I don't know. I try to go for, like I said, so you try to go for 2 to 3 games a week, and then events when I can is kind of what I would say. But in terms of hourly commitment, it's like 805 hours a week.
Okay, understood. Oh, okay, so tell me about your. I mean, again, you've mentioned that a little bit, but tell me about your LGT history. So I think you've mentioned in the pre-recording conversation that we had that you've been to 3 events, or is this one going to be the
so
third?
This will be my 3rd, but I've done 2 years and 2 invitationals. So The ones I've done, so 2019, I'm pretty sure it was 2019. The one where it was still 8th edition. Yeah, so I played White Scars Triple Battalion List, and this was kind of like where I really started getting known. I got to do all the podcast circuit for this one because I top 4 at LGT. So I played it was like 4 squads of intercessors, 5 squads of scouts, and 3 squads of eliminators in White Scars. And this was the first event that played the no Cs. So if I won the roll off, I deployed like 45 models 9 inches away from your deployment zone and went, they all advance in charge. And not many people had fun with that. That's the one I played. I played Nick in the finals. I played the Invitational for that one as well. I ended up losing to Josh Death by 1 point in the 3rd round and finished, I think, 5th in that one. So I finished 4th and 5th over the 2 events of that one, winning. I went 2-1 and then 5-0. That was really good. That really got my name out there. That was when I started getting podcast invites. I got to start knowing people overseas. They started to know who I was as opposed to just being somebody who did kind of well at the UK events and was on Team Scotland, which is what I was before that. And then 2021, which would have been last year, I played a variant of Nassim Fouquet's Iron Hands list. So Nassim had been running the Whirlwind of Rage and +1 to hit on the charge, and I went, nah, I'm going to snowflake that. And then it was the AdMech meta, so I was like, I need something that can survive AdMech. Took a motherfucking Leviathan off my shelf, put it on the board, and said that won't die, and then it died in almost every game.
Bad choice, but what can
no,
you do?
it was actually low key. No, it wasn't a bad choice. It was just that was the event where they were still doing the 5 rounds and then top 2, so you had to push really hard for big wins in every game. So you were like, you couldn't take scrambles, you had to take banners, kind of thing. Because if you dropped 5 points, you wouldn't make top cut. And then I ended up having a really rough game. I went 2nd against Necrons and only ended up scoring like 70 points. And then that dropped me far enough into the lower bracket that I got caught by one of the AdMech players who went first to me in the mission where you couldn't hide. And it was just, that matchup was always going to be a coin flip, but I built my list to coin flip AdMech, didn't get the coin flip. But other than that, I got to 4-0, played AdMech in the last round on table 4. I think I ran the math. If I had scored 100 points, I'd have been 5th. So it didn't matter. And I ended up finishing 52nd at that one because I got like 50 points in the last round and catapulted down the rankings. So yeah, I made 4-0 and then dropped the game at that one. In the Invitational, I won game 1 and then lost to Malik to come 3rd, 4th. Which not super unhappy with, given he won both the events that year.
Yeah, but then again, the Invitational is a Shark Tank, so it could go either way, and it's really down to those little things and little potentially mistakes that people do.
Yeah, no, I made some interesting. That was I wasn't actually part of the Invitational to begin with that time. I was one of the other players had to drop last minute. I got a message while I was on the train down from Scotland. Do you want to play in this? And I was like, yeah. I've only brought 1 army though, so I'm playing that. And it was different missions for the main event from the main event. So we ended up playing Hammer and Anvil, where there were no Hammer and Anvil missions in the main event, so I hadn't even considered them. And I couldn't play AdMech and Hammer and Anvil, it turned out. I ended up going first and doing like no damage because I was out of range completely, which is just not a great place to be in. I think I played that game okay, but my game plan going into it was pretty rough, and I misevaluated some of the terrain, so I made some mistakes in that one. I think if I played that game again, I could have taken Malik. I think I could have, but I have to say that. And then if I'd gone first against Ash, I think I could have taken him as well. Or again, actually, I went 2nd all 5 games that tournament as well, which was real rough as a Iron Hands player who really wants to go first in Alpha U. So yeah, that was it was a good event. Ended up being a pretty rough result, but I still finished top 10% or top. I finished like 52nd out of 500 players, so not too unhappy with that. Obviously, down from the previous year. But.
Absolutely. Okay, so is there, apart from the sheer size of LGT as an event, and as of last week when I spoke to Zach, he told me that there are like 920 players signed up already, with the capacity for 1,200.
So many players.
It's insane. But apart from the sheer size of the thing, just think 920 players. That's what, like 460 tables or something. I've never seen that many tables in my life. So
yeah, it's like 23 decent sized GTs.
Pretty much. So like apart from the size of the event, although it's very hard to oversee, is there anything special about the LGT as an event?
I don't want to like slag Zach off here because Zach does a fantastic job running events, but all of Zach's events are 40k tournament by the numbers. There is there's not, by design, there's not a lot to differentiate them. They are just the platonic ideal of a 40k tournament. LGT is special because it is LGT, because it has the numbers. It's not special because it's in London. It's not special because of the venue. The venue is frankly a pain in the ass to get to. Especially from Scotland, because it's not like in London either. You got to go like into London and then back out of it. The night there's not a great like night scene or anything like that. Like you don't go for drinks after the event because the nearest bar is like 2 Ubers away. So frankly, not really. I don't. There's not a knock against the tournament because I've gone every year since I started going, and I will continue to. But that is not what LGT is for. LGT is the gaming version of a 40k tournament, whereas you've got like Nova, which is a convention and a charity event, and you've got Adepticon, which is like a big teams event and slideshow, and you've got Vegas, which is Vegas. LGT is about 40k, and that is in itself special because it means that the event is very, very pure in that sense. There is not a lot else going on to distract from we're here to win, which I like. That is what I'm here for, after all.
Right. So because I asked you about your way of preparing, stamina-wise, how to survive the tournament after 40 games. But do you need to put any special time into preparing for the strategy, the missions played, the terrain played? Is it different from WTC or GW terrain or anything like? Yeah. So just tell me about that, because again, in Poland, for example, for the Polish audience, it is very common. Like all tournaments in Poland are played on WTC terrain. So if someone goes to LGT and plays there, they potentially might get surprised by the kind of terrain that you experience there. So tell us something about that. How is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So for starters, Scotland, as much as we can, tries to model ourselves on Poland. So everything we do through Team Scotland, we try to do on WTC terrain. We do 20-0 events for singles. Everything that you guys do, we're like, that's a good idea. We should do that too, because it works so well for you guys. So when we run events in Scotland, not the whole country doesn't do this because we're not as from the ground up as you are. There's a lot of influence from outside that. A lot of people who like the ITC format and things like that because it's popular here. So we try to run all of our singles that way, which means that we already have that like little bit of adaptation because I go to the other Scottish events, the ones that aren't just that terrain. A lot of them use LGT terrain. So yeah, I try to practice on it. I have a set of it at home that I can crack out on my gaming table. I have a couple of my practice partners live very local to me that are also big into trying to do the LGT stuff. So I've got Chris, who lives like 20 minutes away from me, is my ride to most tournaments. So we just crack out the terrain in my garage or his garage and try and play a couple of games every here and there to prep for events. I've won a couple of events on this terrain now. I'm fairly comfortable with it, I think. You kind of have to be if you're going to win a lot of games. I'm not going to think about it. It'll hurt my head if I try to think about all the games I've played on this terrain set now. Obviously, not nearly as much as WTC. I prefer WTC. I think I have to say that. I'm a national captain. But it's definitely not a bad terrain set. It's definitely got its foibles. I don't love how the ruins, you can just walk onto them and see through them. But all that means is I play a army with a little more shooting because you just want to take advantage of the terrain and what it gives you. So yeah, you can't just port something straight over. You have to be careful when porting something straight over from another terrain format. GW terrain being one of the big ones, it just isn't similar to any of the other terrain sets that are out there, whether it's player placed or LGT or WTC. They all do a lot more in terms of like closed sight lines than GW terrain does. So you have to be careful when looking at American results, especially. But all of the sort of other formats, you can kind of go similar. You just have to make sure you're taking it into consideration that it's not going to be the same. He said, having carbon copied Eric Lathers' list and said, yeah, I'll just play that and hope for the best. And it's been going okay. It's a lot harder to hide. It's a lot harder to hide 30 bikes on LGT terrain than it is WTC terrain, but it's not stopping me so far. So we'll hopefully keep it up. But yeah, it's just practice, right? At the end of the day.
So if you wanted to like go into the difference between the LGT terrain and WTC terrain, I mean, what will be the main differences? I think the vents are the invention of WTC, right? And anything else?
So WTC is kind of characterized by having You have a lot more dense terrain on the board, so you have a lot more area terrain, whether it's the vents or the forest, which are just forest in the rulebook. The vents being light cover and dense cover, so they're both the positive keywords and other drawbacks. Very good for armies like Space Marines, anything with a high armor save. They can double down on standing in cover and also get to the -1 to hit, where you're not taking those trade-offs. Whereas something like a Gaunt doesn't really care if it's on a 5 or a 6 up save. So they're very good. It's very good at pushing infantry-based armies, which the terrain, so WTC terrain tends to favor those. But you also tend to see a lot of, I want to say, non-conventionally angled ruins on WTC boards. So they're not sitting at straight edges to the board. So you like if your board is just there at 90 degrees, there tends to be like a couple of those, and then broadly the rest of them are angled so that either objectives, like you can stand on an objective and not be out in line of sight, or be in line of sight, or you can not stand on and be out of line of sight, or you can hide from one of the offensive angles of the board, but not the other one. So offensive angles being like your opponent's deployment zone and the mid board, you can hide from one of them, but not both of them. And that creates a lot of interesting choices in deployment. That's where you have like the 9x5 Ls, which are 9 inches long by 5 inches long, so they don't cover quite as much on the depth dimension, but they cover quite well on the front dimension, which is why they're not always front facing, because it's then very easy to hide behind them. You get something like Bellacore or a Bloodthirster, to bring up an example from Demon's Codex. Yeah, you can kind of hide it from like one side, but not the other, and that creates interesting gameplay. There's ways to push those angles. It's easy to hide stuff, and then when you add in board choice for team events, it then you can become punishingly easy to hide or punishingly hard to hide on those boards. So that's a very big dimension of that, and then you have the containers as well, which just block so much space. And then you go to the LGT boards, which are, they're using the older 9x9 style Ls, so 9 inches by 9 inches, which are functionally impossible to interact with if they're in your deployment zone. It's very, very difficult. You can't chase an angle on them because they're often like less than 6 inches from a board edge. You're not bringing reserves on into them. They are almost like black boxes, like magic boxes from end of 8th edition, where something that's in them is probably not going to die unless you're charging it. And they are all very often in deployment zone on one side. They're not usually in the center. So you often get one side that's very easy to hold and one side that's quite hard to hold. And then you have to make the decision of how much of your power do you want to put threatening your opponent's easy to hold side, how much do you want to put holding your side, how much you want in the mid board. The mid boards tend to be quite sparse. They have the central ruins tend to have windows in them, and then they have a lipped floor, so you can move onto it from either side, and then they become porous and you can see through them. Whereas the ones that are in your deployment zone and on the sides tend to not be. So it's very easy to hide on sort of the sides of the board, and then the mid board is very easy for stuff to walk onto. So I played against the Baneblade around one of the Unconquerable, and I kind of looked at it and I went, if that walks onto that ruin on turn 2, it can literally see 4 objectives and my deployment zone. So how do I make sure that that's not a problem? Whereas on WTC boards, it just doesn't see you. So you have to, it's a lot easier to get sightlines. There's less dense. There's only 4 little walls that are often clustered in either one set or 2 sets of 2 that are on an objective. So dense is almost non-existent. So -1 to hits become a lot more powerful natively. If you've got effects like that give you dense, they become a lot better because normally they don't interact, but then you can stack them. So something like Jormungandr for Tyranids, if Leviathan wasn't clearly broken, might actually be a little more of a advantage because you get that dense cover. You can stack it with Venom Throats at that point, whereas dense and dense does F all. So yeah, I broadly find them a lot more open. There's a lot less to hide on, but then they have this one monolithic L that just says this is where you exist. And I played Hiveguard on that thing until I literally could not anymore, because it turned out that was quite good.
So that's the terrain. So it definitely affects how you even structure your list, because you need to either be able to bring something that is resilient with -1 to hit or to wound, or just be able to hide it, be it on the board or off the board and come in later turns. How about rules-wise? Is the LGT different rules-wise to the WTC, for example? One thing that immediately comes to my mind that I wanted to ask about was at the WTC or on WTC terrain. I'm thinking of warriors, but I think also like Hive Guard.
Anything on a 50mm base at the upper floors of WTC ruins, yeah.
So are there any other little things like that differentiate the LGT from WTC?
I don't want to say no, but it's almost it's a lot of the little foibles of 40k, the little inconsistencies they get. So they get ironed out one way or another. So like WTC, if your base is smaller than the ruin floors, which is they're 2 inches wide. So if you're less than a 40mm base or larger than a 40mm base, you can't stand with them. So Tier 2 warriors can't go up levels in 40k ruins or in WTC ruins, whereas on LGT they can. So there was actually a really cool thing you could do with the LGT ruins because they're quite tall. You can deploy warriors with flesh hooks on like all 3 floors of them, and then just go straight out because you ignore the vertical distance. So warriors become a little more mobile on LGT ruins. I'm gonna be honest, I don't tend to notice it that much, but I don't know how much that is just because I've internalized the WTC rulings from playing it so much, and I notice where they're different for LGT, but it almost always doesn't really matter. They're just kind of like in the edge case scenario, they've ruled one way or another. The big things that you might notice are like the Reaper Obliter Axe WTC was ruled that you'll get the Feel No Pain against the mortal wounds because of attack allocation, blah 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 blah. I don't want to get into it, but LGT have ruled otherwise. So Terranists get a little bit of a boost that way. LGT have also ruled that if you're like a Harridan, you can deploy and then select on one, where WTC ruled the opposite. You can run fortifications in LGT. I think you really struggle to deploy one, but you could run one. I've definitely seen webway gates, for example. So it's a lot of little things that kind of don't really add up to much. They're definitely there. The 2-inch engagement range thing was definitely a thing that would have been noticeable for this LGT, but has been thankfully fixed by GW today. I'll just date the episode today. So that was a really nice surprise to get at lunchtime, is that the game is a little bit less of a hot mess. Yeah, there's definitely differences, but I think they're differences that are small enough that you won't notice them over the course of normal gameplay unless you go looking for them. Which is a good thing. I think that's a much better scenario than what we had in like 7th edition, where the game was just drastically different from event to event. There's little things, you'll notice them if you go looking. If one of them interacts specifically with your list, you'll probably remember the FAQ specifically. Like I can definitely recall the Reaper Obliter Axe FAQ. But other than that, it's much of a muchness. It's just 40k really.
All right, so and I need to ask this because there will be another Polish touch at the LGT in the form of the Polish referees that are going to attend. So Typhus, the captain of the Polish national team, and Pumba, one of the newest additions to the Polish national team, I think they're coming to the LGT to actually referee the event. But from your experience, is the involvement of referees, vital to the LGT, or is the culture of playing, so high that the referees are not really called in very much?
I mean, I don't know if it's so much the culture of 40k at like a top level is that we don't involve referees, but the 40k players are bitch ass scared of calling for one. Genuinely, in 40k, it is so stigmatized for calling a judge. If you call a judge, it is almost flat out. Your opponent will almost always just take it as you are accusing them of cheating, which
oh wow,
isn't
I have no idea.
It's definitely how it feels. Like even sometimes I'll just to give an example, I played one of my teammates, and I asked him to like look up a rule mid-game, and it was genuinely like he was offended that I had asked him to check a rule. It's just worse with judges. It is just part of the culture of definitely English and Scottish 40k, and from what I understand, American 40k as well. Calling a judge is so stigmatized because it's just not the done thing. You're expected to resolve the game as a gentleman between you and yourself. Involving somebody from outside is you saying that you don't believe your opponent, you don't trust your opponent to get it right. You should only call a judge if it's like, I don't know if this guy's in range or not, or could you watch me move this while I run to the bathroom? That's what judges are for in 40k in the UK, not for I don't think this guy's right, could you tell him he's wrong? Because that's what it sounds like you're doing when you call for a judge. The guys were at I was at Leicester, where Tivus and Puma were both there, and they were actively reffing with the top 4 tables and the top 2 tables. And I got to chat with them a bunch because my teammate was playing in the finals, so I was having a chat with them while they were not really watching the game because it was Drakari versus Speedwall, who gave a shit. But they saw it. They saying it should come up. They point it out. They talk through it with the guys, and I love that style of active judging where it's just about making sure the 2 guys are having a clean game, and that any disputes that come up that aren't play mistakes get fixed. But the whole, you stick your hand up, you shout judge in a crowded room, people will look like you just shouted fire, or that their mum has done something to stay still in the bathroom. It's a real shame. It's a real shame. I don't think it's a positive aspect of the 40k community that we view each other with such distrust, that calling a judge is calling you out rather than just trying to establish where the game should be. but it's not something that's going away anytime soon. But hopefully seeing more and better judges like Neil Kerr and the Polish guys at events will continue to grow the trust in the community for judges. But it's a long way to go, I think, on that one.
Okay, that's the most interesting take I've heard on refs ever, I think. But yeah, but I mean, when I spoke to Pumba and Typhus about this like a year ago, they also told me, I think they attributed it to the fact that people in the UK just know the rules well and their books and the rule book, and that they don't want to approach the refs because there is no need for that. But you make it sound like it's something completely different. So I'll trust you on this one because you're the inside man for this.
Yeah, it's definitely not an incredibly stunning rules knowledge because we've had to read the codexes in our native language. I don't think half the players I've played at 40k can read, let alone read the rulebook.
And then also the way it's written leaves so much room for interpretation that, you know. All right. Last question about like the rules and so on. Are chess clocks an option or a must at the event?
So that's another interesting question because I force all my teammates to play on chess clocks because a couple of them are quite slow, but when they play on chess clocks, they're kind of players that will play to the time they're given. And if you tell them they've got 3 hours, they'll play for 3 hours. If you tell them they've got an hour and a half of a 3-hour game, they'll play for an hour and a half. So I have to make sure that I'm being strict on those. So for those guys, I try to be strict on myself as well and always play on a clock. Despite, I don't think I've ever timed out in a game of 40k. I'm probably wrong. I've probably timed out like once or twice, like in practice, like obviously, but in events, I don't think I've ever timed out. I don't think I've come close a couple times, but I do it to partly keep myself honest, to make sure I'm not taking up more of the game than I should, and to keep my opponent honest as well, because that's a very important aspect. So I consider them a must because I need to be representing my teammates the kind of players they should be being, which is players who play on a clock and who play within their time and don't take advantage. I don't broadly love playing on one. I actually played competitive chess in school. I don't know if you could tell from the whole everything about me, but it wasn't sports, so it had to be something. So I played, so I was used to playing with the chess clock. It's not like a stressful thing for me. I know it can be for some people, which is part of why a lot of people don't like using them, and I understand that. But for me, it's pretty natural. I say natural, like I understand the structures, the rigmaroles, the if you choose which if you go second, you get to choose which side of the board it's on, all that kind of stuff that comes from chess. So like if I go first, I give it to my opponent. I'm like, put it where you want, and if I go second, I'm like, it's going here.
All right.
But yeah, for me, they're a must. But if my opponent asked me not to play on one, and it wasn't like, round 5, round 6, I would probably be like, yeah, man, we'll be fine. But if I look at my opponent's army and I'm like, I'm playing 150 Gene Circuit models and you're playing 13 knights, I'm going to put it on because otherwise you're going to feel like we're hard done by if you time out. Which is another interesting aspect of it. So I don't know. I feel like you should always play on a chess clock if you have any doubt that the game is going to go to time, whether it's because of you or not, and that you should be stricter with yourself than you are with others. So yeah, I would say they're a must, but I'm always looking for a weaselly excuse not to play with one so that I can chill out.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's good to know because people going to the event should at least be familiar with the concept and be ready for maybe your opponent asking to play with one or something like that. So that experience is always.
And also, that's another one of those things where if your opponent asks you to play on a clock, it can feel like they're accusing you of thinking you're going to slow play, which is the same thing as the gut judging thing. So you have to be not careful of that. But if you look at your opponent's army, it's like, oh, you're playing 170 racks, and you just reach in your bag and you're like, cool, we're using this. It can feel a little targeted, which is, you're trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
So I always try to have that discussion at the start, like, I'm not going to death clock you. If you run out of time and I've got time left, we'll finish it out. I really don't care. This is just to keep us honest and keep us on pace. That I don't mind so much. I don't like death clocking people. I don't think I've ever done it. I've definitely done it in practice to like teammates where I'm like, no, you need to fucking learn. But I try not to death clock people in events, and I've never been death clocked to my knowledge. So it's just one of those where you've got to strike that balance of being a nice guy, being enjoyable to play against, and adding each other on Facebook after the event, but also making sure you finish your game and that you don't get taken advantage of.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's a gentleman's game, and you need to talk it through probably at the very beginning. Like, say what your intentions are, explain that, I'm not here to cause problems. I'm here to have fun like yourself, but this clock will help me keep discipline or something like that. So I mean, it's a completely different thing than just putting it out there and making him assume that you're thinking he's going to run out of time or something like that. All right. Listen, I've kept you here for long enough. I think I have one last question for you, unless there is anything that you yourself feel that we should touch upon. But you've mentioned, the preparation for the event, bringing the mats with you, to have a sit down or rest, or just, so your legs don't hurt that much or something. But do you have, for example, to an inexperienced player who's coming to the event, do you have any piece of advice to make their lives easier, to prepare themselves for the event better?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of easy bits that are like, things you can do to keep yourself on like that mental stable. Find a hype song. It genuinely works for me really well. Just like pick a song and just before a tough game or before a match that you're nervous about, go and sit down for a couple minutes, listen to a song, relax, chill out, find somewhere just away from people and just, have a second to yourself. If you're a person like me where I'm quite introverted, I like to be on my own. I recover when I'm on my own, and then doing things with people is energy expenditure. So it helps me a lot to take that 5 minutes and center myself. That can be really big for me. I have not cycled through hype songs for a couple of years now. I've been on the same one. I'm not telling you what it is. It's very, very, very
But I
important
did
you
the
know that
same. I did the same, and I listen to Rammstein when I go to events. When I drive, I just put one song on by Rammstein, and I just get hyped up for the event. So I completely get that.
Find a list you're happy with. If you're not going to the event to win, which there are like 10 people who are, let's be real. If you're one of the other 908 people who's going to do as well as you can, you will do better with a list you are comfortable with than a list that is perfect. So take a list that you're happy with, take a list that you're practiced on, and the more that you have that structure of having played the list, you'll have built up the heuristics, the mental like shortcuts, the pathways to play your list in a way that takes less effort and is less stress. Having the perfect last 100 points with a unit you've never used before that you painted the night before will probably be worse for you than just playing 100 points that's 10% worse, but you're not going to win a game because your last unit's 10% better. You're shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic, it's already sinking, mate. Go and just be comfortable, be happy, give yourself like the night before off of painting and all that good stuff. If you're like 100% convinced that you've swapped armies from, you've just been playing Imperial Fists and you're bringing your brand new Tyranids. All right, man, I get it. Paint on the Friday night if you have to. But if you're sticking with Imperial Fists, changing from suppressors to dominators isn't going to increase your win rate by more than having a good night's sleep well. So I would definitely focus on that and go with somebody. If you're not there with somebody, try and like attach yourself to a group of people that you know from a club, or ask your round one opponent if you can just like chat to them after the round and go and find them after game two and be like, yo, how did you get on, and talk to them and just find that little bit of a way to unwind, a way to get the things that are in your head out your mouth so that you can focus on what's next afterwards. Going up to people, we have a guy in the UK called Tess, whose big thing is he'll go up to you after a game and he won't ask you if you've won, he'll ask you if you had fun. And it's a really, really good mental reset that I sometimes take on after a game, because if I lose a game, I didn't have fun. I'm really bad at lying to myself about that. I enjoy winning games. I do not particularly enjoy losing games. I take a lot from losing games, but I will be miserable as fuck afterwards. So taking that second to be like, no, do you know what? That was actually a good game. We played, we learned stuff. Taking that reset and having someone else to bounce that off of is really good. So if you're going with somebody, do that. If you're not, try and find someone you know from another event and ask them how their game was, and they will do the same because they're 40k players, and 40k players will always ask because it's just one of the social constructs. If somebody asks you about your game, you ask them about theirs, and they will. Everybody in the room will do that. If you walk up to Richard Siegler and ask him how his game was, he'll ask you if you won your last one. So just take that second and try and like get a bit to yourself and get a bit out there, and then sleep the night before. Was really the big ones for me.
I'm amazed by what you just said, because that's probably the neatest, coolest advice I have ever heard from anyone in this hobby. Like, to bring a mate to just throw ideas at or talk about your games and so on. I mean, that's so obvious, but at the same time, just so cool. And I think it comes down to just what the essence of this hobby really is about. It's supposed to be like a social event where you meet people and you have fun with them, and you just, even though you are a competitive player aiming at the highest, playing for the highest stakes, you just prove that it's not all just about winning. It's about having fun and the camaraderie of the event and so on. And that's what the LGT probably aims at as well. And I hope that everyone who goes gets to experience that, and some of them get to play you, because with that attitude,
well, fingers crossed,
definitely will be
10
fun.
people will get to, or 14.
10
maybe
people
some
will
of them
get it.
twice.
Yeah. So to our listeners, it could be you. Right. Ines, it's been extreme fun, and it was very eye-opening and educational for me. I hope that it was so for our listeners as well. I thank you for your contributions and for your openness and for all the insights. And yeah, to all our listeners, if you like what you've heard, like, subscribe, comment to help us grow, to help us reach new audiences. And then while you're at the event, make sure that you head on to us, to our table, and you say hi, because I will be insanely happy to meet everyone. Ines, you've mentioned that you do a podcast and so on. Would you like to plug that, perhaps?
Yeah, I'll do two quick plugs. One, I am at LGT as well, obviously. I have like a stack of Team Scotland dice. If you come and say hi and you mention that you're from my podcast or from Contact Lost, you can have a dice until I run out. So that's on offer for everybody. And then my podcast is Stat Check. We run a weekly podcast every Tuesday. We run at 11 p.m. UK. That's 12 Poland time. And then whatever the American times are, my co-host deal with that. We run on YouTube, we run on Twitch, and then you can find us on all good podcast apps. It's StatCheck40k. You can also check out our website where we run a meta dashboard where you can look at all the win rates from lists from like GTs, anything over 25 rounds, 25 players, 5 rounds. We track the stats for that. So if you want to look at how good exactly is the worst sub-faction of the game, you could find that it's probably a Chaos Knights or Chaos Titan. It's probably Chaos Titans, and you're not surprised. But if you want to know just how much better Jormungandr is than Kraken, or how much worse Imperial Fists are than Ultramarines, you can find all that there. We also run like ELO, all that cool stuff that you can use to bully your friends about how much better you are than them. We really appreciate the support. We have been running for a couple months now, and it's been really good fun. I run that with Anthony Vanella, who you will probably recognize for being loud and American, and also a good friend of ours, Nathan. So yeah, we really appreciate anybody who checked us out. Thank you, and thank you very much to Contact Loss for having me. It's been a pleasure. Especially because it's one of the few podcasts I listen to for 40k is Contact Lost. So I don't listen to many because it's just not a form of podcast I enjoy, or not a form of media I love. But because Poland is so separated from the rest of the wider world, in that there's not a lot of coverage other than the Polish stuff, I kind of make an exception that I'll listen to Contact Lost, I'll try and listen to the Aussie stuff as well, and then everybody else I get in my like Goonhammer feed. Yeah, Contact Lost, big thumbs up for you guys. You guys do a great job.
I couldn't have asked for a better endorsement. Wow. And yeah, to all our listeners, go and check Stats Check as well. I mean, I did have a listen. I did have a look. I think you do stuff with some Aussies as well, right? I heard you on some Australian podcasts, like 40k Frontiers or something like that.
Yeah, I think we've definitely had Anthony on our War Down Under a couple of times. All of my guys are like absolute media slots, so if we could be on another podcast, we will, because it's all about the networking, baby.
Exactly.
So yeah, I went through one stretch where I think I did 5 podcasts in 2 weeks, and it was horrible. I was like, I can't post this on my Twitter again. Like the third podcast was like, I was on this, thank you. And then the 5th one, I just kind of like didn't post because I was like, nobody's going to care at this point. My guys have been on Grim After Dark, 40k Frontiers, all that stuff. We also we try to have people on our podcast as well, so we do bonus content. So we've had Sam Procopio from the Canadian team talking Blood Angels. We've recently recorded with a guy talking about Alpha Legion. I'm going to be doing Gene Circle chat with Eric Latharus coming up fairly shortly. So yeah, we try to let other people media report to us as well, and try and return the favor.
That's awesome. That's really great. So yeah, hopefully we can get you to visit us again. Hopefully post the event to talk about your victory.
Absolutely.
But even if not victory, then about how the GSC list does and
Yeah, about how I went
that's-
1-4 because I just played it. Because I was just, turns out everybody was just joking to make me take GSC to LGT.
Well, but you've played your games and you know that it works somehow.
Or
There's
they're
some
all,
magic about it.
or they've all decided to just sandbag and lose to me. I wouldn't put it
Absolutely.
past my 3 teammates to have like had a group chat and we're like, we'll all just intentionally lose to NS so that he takes this shit to LGT.
We'll wind him up like that. No, but seriously, it would be awesome to hear. Even God forbid, but if the list doesn't succeed, then to hear why. So what didn't play out. So sooner or later, expect another invite.
I'll put my demolition
all right.
charges where my mouth is, and if I can't back up the shit I talked, I'll at least suffer.
Fantastic. No, okay, so everyone, thank you for listening. One more time, Ines, thank you for joining us, and yeah, to everyone, until next time. Thank you.